Ladies and gentlemen, when I talk about tempo reconstruction of metronome marks, then the word tempo is used in the meaning as the foundation of a performance, of an interpretation, and the meaning of changing your tempo changes every aspect of your performance. It's not just me who's saying that, that's just something that's a fact, that's considered to be just true for every performance that you hear or listen to. For every musician, you want to play a piece, your foundation will be your tempo. You change that, you change everything. But for many musicians today, tempo seems to be equivalent with how fast can I play and how can I play even faster. Always from the perspective of these metronome marks that you're not supposed to talk about a lot. In reality, however, it are those metronome marks given by the composers of the 19th century, read in our modern way, so one click equals the note value of the metronome mark, that leads people, musicians, students, professors, musicologists, in the idea that the authentic performance of those pieces, that what Chopin had in mind, was not here, but here. And we're only here, so we have to push a little bit further. The great thing about all of this is that you keep sending me stuff that I have to talk about. And this is an example of Annick Göttler from The Heart of the Keys. We've featured her before on this channel. Again, with an example of, guys, how can I play even faster? Because see, Chopin wrote actually a metronome mark. And it's faster than I can do. And I'm practicing so much. And this kind of heroic story again unfolds that for many listeners, amateur players alike, seems to be very inspiring. You have to tell me what is so inspiring in practicing for years, for generations, for something of which everybody knows it's unreachable. And we're going to listen to this short. It's not going to take a long time. I have a lot of things to say about that. But the most important thing I want you to take from this, and while listening actually to this fragment, is, do we get an answer to the question if these tempi make sense? If these metronome marks used in the modern way, in our single beat modern approach of the metronome mark, is it so that all of that is just possible to reach? Or do we get another example of someone who shares publicly quite a lot of doubt, but might not be aware of that? So, in short, does Annick give us an answer to the question whether the Black Keys etudes of Chopin, because that will be the one that she will be talking about, is possible or not? Let's listen.
Is it actually possible to play the Black Keys etude in full speed? Let's first figure out what my usual speed would be. Looking at the metronome, this must be something around 108, which is not that far away from the 116 that Chopin wrote. Maybe I can actually play it in full speed. Okay, let's figure out. Okay, so just jumping into 116 is a little bit too fast. So I go even faster than that. Hear me out. I know that sounds weird, but if you want to go faster and you want to feel comfortable in the tempo, you have to go even faster than that to make the final tempo feel slower. Understand what I mean? Okay, anyways, let's try it. Was definitely hard, and 116 is much faster than 108. I figured out today. Let me know in the comments which of all these tempi you like the most, and see you all in London with all Chopin etudes. Is it actually possible?
Again, this is one of these attempts of professors, teachers, influencers here on YouTube talking to a big audience saying like, guys, what we are doing is not fast enough. We should speed up again. But this message should always be combined with what she had to say about Chopin when she was recording. Here it is again.
I can't play like this. I don't know what to do. My fingers are swollen and I can't really move them.
I think I have to cancel this.
I practiced so much for nothing.
And so on and so on. So practicing for a Chopin recording, so music composed by someone of which Garrick Olsen himself of tone-based piano says like Chopin was a weakling. And it's true. Chopin couldn't even walk the stairs alone. When Clara Schumann met him And Robert Schumann, obviously in the 30s in Leipzig, I think, he was playing a Viennese piano, light action, you know? And Clara describes he has a beautiful tone, but in order to produce one chord forte, only one chord forte, guys, he had to throw his entire body into the keys, and then he was exhausted. That's a guy who can bring a young, talented player like Annick here, like just practicing her etudes for a recording, up to a point where she cannot play anymore because her hand is swollen. And still continuing to think like, hey, I have to go even further. Yeah, that sounds great, right? And I cannot understand these legions of piano amateurs who come to these channels and say like, that's great. Let's just suffer a little bit more. And how great that you share this with us, because yes, I want to play Chopin at full speed. No, you're trying to play Chopin at double speed. How simple is that to understand? Okay, let's go a little further. First off, I can imagine the comments I will get. Yeah, but on a forte piano, good sir, all of this would be possible. Well,
if we speak about tempo, here I can say that my experience to play with the historical pianos gives me a lot of information about tempo in Chopin etudes and scherzo everywhere. Because when you play the historical instrument which Chopin used, it was impossible to play in these tempos because the key didn't answer so fast.
Really? I didn't know that. So here you have someone who can play the piano, because I also know like people will come like, yeah, Annick Göttler, she's just an amateur compared. No, she's a great pianist. Let's not only take Dina Joffe as an example or as a source. We recently made another video about this pianist, also not Mr. Nobody, and this is what he had to say about historical pianos.
Suonate, studiate, incise su un fortepiano, vi posso assicurare che il fortepiano, lo strumento.
So it's not engraved. It's, of course, he made a recording on a fortepiano. That's what the text should say.
È lui a suggerire di prendere un tempo troppo veloce, anche perché non avendo il sistema meccanico di ripetizione rapida delle note, quando abbiamo quindi da ripetere questi sì e poi do, se lo suono non avrei le note che suonano, non ripeterebbero i sì e i do.
So even in a Beethoven sonata where you don't have even repeated notes, the Viennese pianoforte would not be fast enough to do all that. And the black keys etude, there would be a gigantic problem as well, because a lot of notes in that tempo that Annick wants to play, even 104, even in that tempo, there are a lot of notes that actually act in reality as a repeated note. And by the way, guys, the Opus 10 of Chopin, the etudes, don't think on a play. Think about the Viennese pianoforte. He was there when he composed these etudes. Opus 10 number 1 definitely, and I think also Opus 10 number 5 was already played or conceived or even composed in Vienna. So when the Viennese pianoforte says no, the player will say no as well, because you don't have a double escapement. So with that out of the way, let's just see what Chopin wrote at the beginning. So you have the metronome mark here, 116 quarter note, and you have description here of vivace. So vivace meaning what exactly? Prestissimo? Well, let's check our good trusted Czerny. Before you say like Karl Czerny, how dare you bring him in the context of a Chopin video, because Czerny was a musical and Chopin was one of the greatest musical geniuses we had. Yes, true, but Chopin had a lot of respect for Czerny. He was not that much of an idiot as we think he was today. He was very well respected. This is part of his pianoforte school, Opus 500, simultaneously published in Vienna, in German, in France, of course, in French, and in the UK. I mean, how many of us today could say that? And so he was considered in that time to be the piano teacher number 1, and also a reference in regards to Bach and Beethoven, also to Chopin, by the way. And so what did he have to say about vivace? Here it is. Vivace, lively with warmth. Well, that's not very precise, I get it. But luckily we have here the Italian tempo words, grave, largo, larghetto, andante, andantino, allegretto, allegro, presto, prestissimo. And we see here allegro, fast, lively with agility. So compare that with lively with warmth. So now we can debate forever what is vivace actually, but in the eyes of Czerny, we can safely say that it was a little slower compared to allegro, and somewhat between allegretto and allegro, because allegretto says somewhat lively, cheerful, yet not hurrying onward. Vivace again, lively with warmth. Here it is. Lively with warmth. Allegro, fast, lively with agility. So I would say, based off this description, that Vivace, according to Czerny, is leaning more toward allegretto instead of allegro. So, that's interesting. We have a kind of allegretto or allegro ma non troppo here in a piece where a very talented young pianist who can walk stairs without actually being out of breath, I suppose. Like, she is in the prime of her life. She has the ability of her full strength, so to say. Compare that to Chopin, and she's struggling. She's actually giving the answer to the question. That's what I said at the beginning. Keep that in mind. The question, can I play it in 116? The answer is no. But on top of that, Vivace being kind of allegretto, allegro ma non troppo, that means that Chopin didn't have the fastest tempo possible in mind for this piece. And so how can you combine that? How can you bring, at one hand, quarter note 116, there's a young pianist saying, I cannot play it. On the other hand, a piece marked with vivace brillante, which is like allegro ma non troppo at the maximum. There should be room for increasing speed. Because otherwise, Chopin made a mistake, right? He gave a metronome mark that is like higher than possible, so higher than prestissimo today, and he marked the piece only vivace. Well, remember, recently I had made this video. This 1863 Beethoven makes modern pianists look like amateurs. And if you haven't seen that video, go and check it out, because I'm talking in that about a source by Adolf Bernhard Marx, pianist, not actually a pianist, musicologist, author about music. And he wrote in 1963 this book about Beethoven sonatas, and he mentions a few last movements of some sonatas in which he said, like, hey, some people today can play double the speed required, but doesn't mean that you need to do that. You see where I'm going? It's too fast, 116. The historical piano says no, even to the current speeds. Then we have sources in the 19th century, like this one, that says, like, in some instances people played twice the speed. And then we have a piece here labeled as allegro ma non troppo that we almost can double. So this short should not be labeled. How can I play Chopin in full speed, like she says at the beginning?
Is it actually possible to play the Black Keys etude in full speed?
No, the question is it possible to play the Black Keys etude in double speed? And now go into the comment box and say, like, I know a pianist who can play that. Good. Then we still are here. We have some pianists who can play in that tempo. We can't. No pianist that can play double. Why would someone, could you ask, want to play the Black Keys etudes in double the tempo? Because the answer is simple. Because it should be possible. Why? Because if you label this as an allegretto, allegro ma non troppo, well, there are several sources, even in the 18th century, that says that allegretto, you double the tempo of an allegretto and you end with allegro assai or prestissimo. Quantz does it, if I'm not mistaken. In Quantz has allegro assai. Turk, 1789, 1808, very influential in the Viennese piano period, second generation Bach student, also does that. If I'm not mistaken, Thomas Young as well, 1801. And you go on and on. So this relationship, you double the tempo from adagio assai to allegretto, a kind of middle tempo, tempo ordinario, and you double that and you end in prestissimo. That applies for centuries. And so here we have a piece that Chopin, in a modern way, made a mistake because he marked it in a tempo with the metronome mark that is unplayable, unreachable today for many pianists. Also, so higher than prestissimo, but he labeled it with his Italian tempo word, or vivace, as to be at kind of middle tempo. So he leaves the room to double it, but the metronome mark seems not to imply that. How do we fix that problem? By our whole beat metronome practice, which is simply you take 2 ticks for the note value, the back and forth of the metronome. So the 116 is not tak, 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 it's tak, 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 tak. And so you arrive in half of the tempo. And then, this makes sense. This makes sense. She might not be able to play it in double speed, but she's close to. Then the question is, of course, how does it sound in what we say is our tempo? Well, here is a recording that we're going to release this year, made by Alberto Sana. That is my partner also here of the symphonies and whole beat, available. Check out in the description box. You help us a lot and support the work that we are doing just by considering purchasing this. But he is working on the full Beethoven keyboard works. So part 1 will be released in a few weeks. I'm recording this 11th of January 25. We're going to release that as a Kickstarter, the first of 3 boxes in February on Kickstarter. So check it out. There is also a link to our email list in the description box, and I will update you there in the first place. But Chopin, he recorded already in 2021. We are far behind in releasing all of that, what we have recorded, but it sounds like this. And now for you, if you're not familiar with what we are doing, this must be a shock, really a shock. Like the first thing you will be thinking is like, hey, stupid, you really think that Chopin played like that? My answer to that is yes. But if you listen to that, I will play it like a little bit longer, like a minute or so. Listen to all the rhythms that you certainly hear, all the accents, all the inner lines. It's not just speed. You can actually hear the notes, and you can hear all the layers, the rhythmical layers. It's super fascinating. So even if you think I'm an idiot, and even if you think that this whole beat metronome principle, the WBMP as we call it, is just nonsense, that is invented by a flat earther who doesn't believe in science. I do, as I made clear in my last video. But even if you think that, just give it 1 minute. Here you go. It's just incredible, right? And then go back to what Czerny writes. Vivace, lively with warmth. You may think that I'm biased, that I'm like whatever, but give me another solution. We take something, an element of the past that we see as heroic. We worship these composers, we worship these pianists that were so much above everything that we have today, and we fail to see that it's not possible. Annick Göttler, I'm convinced that she would outperform Chopin easily. It would not even be a competition. It would be actually something she would refuse to play when Chopin would sit behind the piano. He must have been an exceptional pianist, but exceptional not in the modern term, because today exceptional means like how fast you can play. What so many pianists, what so many musicians, what the majority of musicians and musicologists also, for musicologists there's no excuse, but musicians are doing is actually a very normal evolution pattern. It started already early 19th century, the increase of tempi. The complaints we have in the 19th century are like, there are a lot. And so this is still ongoing. The only funny thing almost is that the metronome who were given in the 19th century to refrain that movement, to stop that movement from going faster and faster, they almost give us the impression that we have to speed up a little bit more. From 108 to 116, we're almost there. While the 116 quarter note, if you would translate that in a modern metronome mark, would be 8th note 116. So it's funny in a way, but it's also dramatic. Think about the injuries. 70% of pianists today, both amateur and professionals, have chronic injuries. I made a video recently and I want to dive more into that. Therefore, this is important. Check out our patrons in the description box. They allow me to do what I'm doing. We have also in the future, we are already now, Patreon installed at a free membership, and I will see and I will think and I will work on something that I can actually provide you when you are a free member. We have, of course, paid content as well, podcasts, practicing sessions, things like that. But I see a large community actually on Patreon gather around these free memberships just to be a little bit closer to the project. And I'm thinking and working on giving you there more information behind the scenes, and especially what we are working on, because that's difficult for me to communicate that with you. Looking forward to meeting all of you over there. For now, that was it for today. Thank you for watching. We see each other very soon again. Bye.